Hello, welcome back to our podcast, or welcome to our podcast. My name is Matthias, and I'm here today with my mother.
Hello.
So, mother, today we're going to talk about marriage and family matters within the Catholic Church.
Interesting.
So, I know your kind of idea and knowledge on the Catholic belief is not maybe as strong as I do, because I go to a Catholic church and I'm aware of the Catholic beliefs. But essentially, for those who don't know, we are a Christian Orthodox family, so our belief system is a little bit different. So we're gonna kind of compare and contrast Orthodox beliefs with Catholic beliefs, and then we're gonna dive right into the general idea of the sacraments.
Sure.
Okay. So, us Orthodox believe that the fundamental process of marriage is to attain holiness. So this ultimately means that the spouses grow together in Christ to realize their godlikeness. So us Orthodox believe that we get married to essentially grow our relationship with God.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Right?
Yes.
So us Orthodox believe that we become one person and then strengthen our relationship with God.
And it's not necessarily to procreate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whereas, I'll get into that. So like our idea is the couple is called to, essentially by our church, to continuously create and recreate a communion of mutual love, trust, personal fulfillment, and self-sacrifice. So one noticeable thing that the Catholics believe is that the Catholic Church believes that procreation should be in there, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas us Orthodox, we don't have that in there, right? Our idea of marriage is different, mm-hmm. right?
And also, they believe marriage in the Catholic Church is known as the holy matrimony.
Exactly.
What I understand, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So the teaching of the Catholic Church is that marriage may only be between one man and one woman with each other's partners, free and willing consent for the good of each other and the transmission of human life. So if you notice at the end, I said the transmission of human life is because the Catholic Church is very strong on their belief of like marriage and procreation.
Correct.
Essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So as well, I said like willing consent. So consent is something that's really important in the Catholic Church. So consent by definition of the Catholic Church is the consent by which the spouses mutually give and receive one another is sealed by God Himself. From their covenant arises an institution confirmed by the divine law, even in the eyes of society. The covenant between the spouses is integrated into God's covenant with man, meaning authentic married love is caught up into the divine love. So, as it sounds, it's pretty self-explanatory. Consent is just...
It's an agreement.
It's an agreement.
Between participants to engage in sexual?
Yeah, I guess, according to Catholic beliefs. I believe so from what I see. As you know, Mother, that's not the same for us Orthodox.
Correct.
Yes, consent is important in Orthodoxy, but the idea of consent is completely different. So we believe in consent is, yes, sometimes it is for sex, but it's not for the procreation of life. Mm-hmm. That's basically the difference, right? So when it comes to consent, it's important to take in that it's for the idea of procreation. So procreation is to essentially start a family and start life. So something that is really important that the Catholic Church is interested in prior to, the beginning of a family is commitment. Mm-hmm. Right? So essentially what the Catholic Church believes is commitment means living out our faith even in the midst of the misunderstanding or mocking world. So commitment to Jesus Christ is a privilege of self-oblation, alongside the Lord Jesus, in whom we place unreserved faith, hope, and love. So, this can be seen in the Grace of Sacrament of Matrimony in 1641. By reason of their state in life and their order, Catholic spouses have their own special gifts in their people of God. This grace, proper to the Sacrament of Matrimony, is intended to perfect the couple's love and to strengthen their dissoluble unity. By this grace, they help one another to attain holiness in their married life and the welcoming and educating of their children. So, the idea of commitment is it's like basically like stepping stones into to the procreation.
So basically, marriage symbolizes the love, so the beginning of a family, and it's a lifelong commitment.
Yeah.
So it's more than a physical union.
Yeah.
Right? Could be spiritual and emotional, maybe.
Yeah.
And I guess they compare God, just like God and His church.
I guess, yeah, kind of. Like, I think commitment, the Catholic belief on commitment is just like, their idea is, it's kind of a commitment, not necessarily with just your partner, it's a commitment with God. But, again, this commitment entails like again, that idea of procreation, right? So, commitment would be like a stepping stone into family life, right? So then comes the idea, like we've talked about or brought up many times, procreation itself. So Catholic ideas in marriage and family matters and the concept of procreation is essentially procreation. Children are a gift from God, the fruit of married love. Through sexual union within the state of marriage, the couple is able to participate in the divine task of co-creation. So essentially, once, the idea of commitment and consent is formed, procreation can arise, like the idea of procreation. So the difference between us Orthodox and the Catholics is that us Orthodox, we don't, like I said before, we don't necessarily believe that we get married to have a family. We get married for God. Whereas Catholics I believe the general term would be like, their idea is kind of like you get married and do this commitment and all these things for procreation. And their belief of procreation is it has to be together, and that brings in the idea and the concept of consent and such things, right? So this can be seen in Psalm verse 127. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward. So it's pretty self-explanatory, correct? So then comes along sacramental covenant.
Okay, what exactly is that?
Okay, so sacramental covenant, according to the Catechism of the Catholic Church, is in 1657. It is here that the father of the family, the mother, children, and all members of the family exercise the priesthood of the baptized in a privileged way. By the reception of the sacraments, prayer, and thanksgiving, the witness of a holy life and self-denial and active charity. Thus, the home is the first school of Catholic life and a school for human enrichment. Here one learns endurance and the joy of work, fraternal love, generous and even repeated forgiveness, and above all, divine worship and prayer and the offering of one's life. So, another where the idea of sacramental covenant is in Luke verse 22. Luke 22 verse 19 to 20. Took the bread, said the blessing, broke it, and gave it to them, saying, "This is my body, which will be given for you. Do this in memory of me." And likewise the cup after they had eaten, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which will be shed for you." So, according to the Roman Catholic teaching, both the Church and this also entails the Jewish belief system, that the sacramental covenant is a promise with God, kind of.
Right.
Right? So essentially a sacramental covenant, for example, like baptism and such, is the stepping stones into your commitment, to prove your commitment to Jesus Christ. That's what Catholics believe. Right?
Okay.
So
Interesting.
that would mean so essentially marriage and family matters is one of them, because marriage, there's baptism, there's communion and all those such. But I think one of the important ones for Catholics is baptism. I'm not really sure why, but all I know is that it's pretty important for them. So that's basically sacramental covenant. So essentially, once you have your family and you procreate naturally, sacramental covenant is what comes next. So that would mean baptism and the start of the life of your family and their belief and trust with God, right?
Wouldn't baptism be an entry to Catholic?
Yeah.
Sort of?
Yeah. I think it's like the entry to the church. Right? So that's again what a sacramental covenant is. So the difference between sacramental covenant and a promise is different. Okay? So a promise is binding. So it differs from a simple resolution, which is a present purpose to do or omit certain things in the future. As between man and man, a promise pledges the faith of a man who makes it. He promises wishing some other person to trust him and depend upon him. So Catholics believe that a promise it's not like how we say, oh, I promise I'll do this for you. Or like, I promise I'll get this done, right? Like, I'll promise this will be next, right? And so on. A promise is with only God.
And
right?
your partner, no?
And your partner.
That's what I
heard.
Yeah, okay.
So I think the promise is sacred to just your family and just to God. So like, kind of like, I think from what I believe, again, us Orthodox, everything's a little different. But promises is kind of for your spouse, essentially promising to be united for God, and for like with God, it's to promise to your promise with God would be to ensure that your unity with your partner is kind of like kept sacred. Right? So then that again would kind of round this back to commitment, right? So essentially Catholics, their belief system is pretty strong, right? Not saying that us Orthodox belief system is not strong. I'm saying that they follow this like heavily, you know?
There's more steps to it.
Exactly. Like, you know how
More
us Orthodox, we believe that it's kind of like a way of life. Like, these should be taken as a way of life and to interpret life. I believe Catholics think that this should be taken like in the literal sense. Okay? So I think like with the promise, that's like during prayer, procreation is during sex, sacramental covenant is baptism, communion, etc. Okay? So to round this kind of all up, one thing that we haven't brought up is the idea of free, total, faithful, and fruitful. So I'm going to explain to you what those are, and then I'll kind of break them down for you, okay? So sit tight and enjoy this. So free is the first one, and it talks about how having the ability to be free is the key to a well-kept marriage and keeping the sacraments of Jesus Christ in mind. So being free is to have, I guess, is their idea is like being open-minded and keeping Jesus Christ in your relationship. So it's like kind of how do I explain it? Like in a marriage, you should always have Jesus in mind. Essentially, what their idea of free is. Then is total. So total is it is in relation to how assuring that a marriage is well kept and sacred would be ensuring that the marriage is total and that your love is kept sacred for your spouse. So I think total is kind of like self-explanatory. It's keeping that promise, that sacred love for your partner. That's kind of it. That's what total kind of means. And then we have faithful. So although it sounds very generic, and you kind of like, oh, like I know what that means. So the term is a little different. So a general topic on how ensuring that the Catholic Church and Jesus Christ's values are kept into mind while carrying on a marriage, as well as being faithful and trusting in a marriage and keeping the love between spouses. So the idea of faithful is not necessarily like, oh, being faithful to God and, you know, being faithful to only Jesus Christ. It's also being faithful to your partner, obviously, and combining those faith, like the faith with God and your faith into like unity with your partner, and kind of combating those two together and creating your own type of faithful, which would be like ensuring that your partner feels loved, but you balance that with Jesus Christ,
right,
essentially. Right? And then finally we have fruitful. So as stated, being fruitful means to keep in mind that the future of marriage and not to fear anything that may come from the Lord. In the specific topic, it would be children. So fruitful is to, like I said, not fear anything that God gives you. So don't be scared if God gives you children, right? Which would be pregnancy. Don't be scared if you're kind of going through a rough patch and stuff like that. To always have faith, right? And accept anything that God gives you, right? And in the Catholic Church, again, like I said, pregnancy, children, all of that is very strong in this kind of area. Rounding this to back what I said together to kind of finish this up. The Catholic community and the idea of family is to help the common good by helping and caring for the needs of others. According to this section of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, Catholics are raised in such a way that we are called to help others feel safety and security that we feel within our families. So spreading the gospel is kind of like an example of how that would be a prime example. So spreading the gospel is how we share and provide to a community. Obviously, it's like helping a community, like the generic basic terms, but it also has to tie faith. So like I said, spreading the gospel, blah, blah, blah. So again, the difference between us is, just to top it all up, is marriage in the Eastern Orthodox Church is a holy mystery sacrament. So we believe that like a priest marries a man and a woman, which would create the unity that we talked about. You become one, etc., etc. The Catholics believe that you kind of do this, but with God, and you remain your individual self. Essentially, that's kind of wrapping this all up. So, like I said, there's differences, but there's also similarities between each other. So what do you think?
That's great. I mean, I've gotten quite a perspective, and I've learned a little bit more about Catholics.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's awesome.
But you get the general basis, right? Of family is Catholics is children.
Correct.
Us is relationship with God. That's like the most simplest term that you can put it.
The difference.
That's the difference.
Great.
So that's it.
Awesome.
So that's my way of explaining marriage and family matters according to the Catholic Church. I hope you kind of enjoyed it.
Yes, thank you, Matthias. That was awesome.
You're welcome. So, alrighty, so that tops everything up. Thank you so much, and have a good night.